Okay. Are we running? Are we live? Is it working? I believe so. I think we're good. Okay, well, hello ladies and or gentlemen and everyone else in between. How are we doing this week? Okay, well, ultimately this week for me has been a bit of an interesting one, bit of a fun one. I'm still waiting on some of the opportunities that I was talking about. Oh, broken again. Are we back? Are we back? Seemingly so. Right, as I was saying, this week's been a bit of a busy one. I'm still waiting, playing the waiting game for some of the opportunities and things that I've discussed before. Hello to the person that's just turned up. Um, I'm still waiting on some of the to hear back from those, and it could very well be another week or so before I hear on those. In which case, changes and whatever else will be going on. Unfortunately, I can't really go into. So we're going to have to wait on that a little more. But this week in particular has been interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, because of the prep for these opportunities and these other things that I'm trying to work on at the moment. Not this week just gone, but the week before. I didn't have enough time to sort everything out and get everything done to have a full complement of videos this week. In which case, there was one gameplay video and one during the day coaching video that didn't end up happening. In which case, to those of you that would have been here to look for those and whatever else, then I apologise. But considering I was going to do this live stream today anyway, I didn't feel it was necessarily worthwhile me going and making a kind of channel update or channel announcement or anything like that about it. It was a couple of videos. They went by. Hopefully, it's all cool and groovy either way. But also this week, there were two videos that I put out that gained an awful lot of a lot more attention than maybe I thought they would, which was kind of fun, kind of interesting. The first one, which I'm really glad gained a tad more attention more quickly than otherwise, was the one around so-called female Viagra. Because again, the video that I saw, the stuff that was going on in it, and how irresponsible it was, and also just what it was suggesting that a pill would do when the pill does not do that. It was kind of concerning to me. But I've had some follow-up questions and some follow-up things on that over the last few days, in which case next week there is a follow-up to that video coming out looking into the wider realm of kind of female Viagra or so-called female Viagra and other bits and pieces around that. Because it's an interesting thing to look at, an interesting thing to discuss around, but also it's something that causes a lot of uncertainty, an awful lot of nervousness and things around it, both in terms of using those things, investigating them. You don't want to indelibly mark your search history, as well as what it could mean for a relationship or whatever else, and also just the safety aspects. Because a lot of these are drugs that have either been bought from somewhere else to be used in this way, are very weird and unreliable in where they even come from, or have been kind of rushed through safety checks because reasons. So I wanted to dive into that a little bit more, kind of talk about that a bit more broadly. So that's going to be coming next week as well. But then also, I did a video on the NPC meme. And there were apparently a lot of people that didn't necessarily like what I was saying. I completely understand why. But as a result, also received a lot of comments and other bits and pieces. And to speak broadly on that just for a moment, because I don't want to go into specifics on the majority of that stuff, because I've done another video that will follow up on some of the comments and some of the other responses and things like that I got. However, there is one particular comment that I wanted to talk about today, which I'll talk about in a minute, because it's possibly one of my favourite comments of all time on that video. But more to the point, I find it very interesting that me expressing a critical kind of approach and a much more nuanced appreciation of both sides of the political spectrum. YouTube, I'm not sure if YouTube's having its continuing. YouTube's been off lately. I mean, even Markiplier the other day was or last night or something, was made a video about how janky YouTube has been lately, and apparently it's still having an issue of some description, because we keep popping in and out. I don't know what that's necessarily going to do to the recording or to the video on demand afterwards. So if it's a bit chopped up and stuff, then I apologise. But I've done all of my speed tests and all my other bits and pieces before I started, and everything's fine on my end. But I have been having, like, for instance, even this morning, YouTube was coming up with, when I was trying to throw in a thumbnail for the video that's coming out today at 5, it had a little hissy fit at me. So if this video's a bit chopped up afterwards, or if the stream keeps kind of dipping in and out, I apologise, but it seems to be, unfortunately, something that's going on with YouTube. I will check my my other bits and pieces. My other bits and pieces for OBS says that everything's running fine. It's not telling me that I'm dropping anything or having any issues. So whatever is happening with YouTube now, because I'm also looking at the back of house. I'm looking at the live dashboard, and it's occasionally loading when it doesn't usually do that. So we'll see how this goes. But anyway, yeah, the thing that kind of I found quite entertaining is that me criticizing the intent or the level of self-awareness or the level of kind of perspective around this meme that in some cases is just fine, but in many other cases it is demonstrably malicious. So many people have decided to dislike and comment and stuff like that, and I feel like that makes more of a statement around them than around me necessarily. But, you know, hey ho, I'm also glad for the conversation points. I'm glad for seeing the reflection of the people that are kind of viewing some of my content. So, you know, I appreciate the responses either way. But it is interesting, and that's and you know, it's a discussion to be had, which again, especially considering the good number of them at the very least put me at fault, it's interesting to respond to them as well, which is why I've done an entire other video that will come out. Unfortunately, you know, I only have so much time, and so when it came to the comments that I responded to and stuff like that, they were all from kind of the various comments and things that I received within the first day or two, because I've got my schedule to keep up with, I've got my other bits and pieces to do. In which case, I haven't, you know, not every comment that I've received is in that video, and among them, there was one this morning that came from a YouTube user called Toxic Masculinity. Who said this? This video is the result of a fence sitter. Nothing wrong with him, but just a quick aside, if you're going to say something and then just place but after it, one of the things that I learned as a coach, and that many others had to be had to kind of pick up on as coaches, and you get taught this a lot in other places as well. But if you're going to make a statement and then put something like but or however or although after it, then you are basically invalidating what you've just said. So nothing wrong with me, apart from there's something wrong with me. Fence sitters try too hard to stay in the middle, that they stay indecisive and find themselves overthinking simple concepts until they are in and out of rationality. Okay, that's interesting. I've never been called indecisive before. That's a new one. I'm usually, in fact, one of the comments that I've got in work a lot, because I tend to focus and go after the result that I want, is that I tend to get kind of dubbed abrupt, because my gears spin up much faster than other people's as soon as I have an objective and I just kind of go for it. So that's interesting. And in and out of rationality. Okay, well, let's see what else you've got to say. The fact is, most of the right take pride in standing on their own personal convictions. Those on the left focus on the collective. No, actually, that's not completely accurate, because you do have people. The left and right aren't just. It's not a flat plane. You have the other axis that is usually ignored in regards to authoritarian versus libertarian, and the whole kind of collectivist versus individualistic thing kind of sits in some of those other areas as well, and can be subdivided in so many different ways. That's why you've got so many different schools of political thought. So it's not as easy to say that they're collectivist and we're individualist, because what it tends to be is towards the center of the political spectrum, towards the center of the compass. That's where you tend to get much more individual kind of focus, and then on the further extremes is where you get collectivist focus. So when you have people declaring kind of us versus them a lot of the time, which again happens on both sides, happens an awful lot, arguably being done right now in the fact is this is the case. This is one type of person, this is another type of person. Firstly, not factual, sorry, but also more to the point, the political spectrum, the political compass is so easily subdivided into so many different parts, so many different places, and the further extremes the further the extremes are as they go, and the further you reach out towards those extremes, you kind of end up finding the collectivist thinking, where on the left you have the nut jobs that are banding together and labeling people Nazi, racist, whatever else, and on the far right hand side of things you've got, for instance, white nationalists, who are very focused on things like purity within their group and stuff like that, where it becomes the same kind of cultish rhetoric over and over and over again. We're seeing it on both sides, and we're seeing the more individualistic side on both sides as well. But also, an authoritarian individualist is going to be someone that's also just as negative as an authoritarian collectivist, or even potentially a highly libertarian collectivist or a highly libertarian individualist, because those people may still then either be incredibly apathetic towards others or over-focused on kind of inserting themselves into other people's lives. There are so many evils and so many subdivisions here. And again, the making generalized statements that unfortunately aren't accurate. In terms of certain areas, in terms of the way that things are presented in many instances, sure, you may very well be seeing in certain news outlets that, for instance, Fox News, I know full well from some of the stuff that I view on there, they tend to go, yes, well, these guys are just this mob and we are all these individuals. But then you actually examine it, and the people then that are watching that content are also a mob, and it becomes this everyone is a good guy in their own eyes. Everyone has their own viewpoint, and removing yourself from that and not acknowledging that is kind of part of the problem here. But anyway, he goes on to say the NPC meme does not fit with both paradigms. Well, yes, it does, because there is nuance across both groups that you're relating to here. So yes, I'm afraid it does. Even if you're not necessarily seeing it, even if you're not aware of it, it's there. You only have so much perspective and so much ability to see, as it were, as an individual. And so when it comes to it, especially when you are in an environment that is very close to it, this is why people employ coaches like myself, because we are further away, so we have that greater perspective, and that greater perspective is one of the things that I try to offer through a lot of the stuff on this channel. Not everything, I still quite happily point out that I'm a human being. I have very clearly stated some of my objections to certain things, but it still comes down to, you need that perspective, and just being centrist doesn't make you a fence sitter. Acknowledging the nuance doesn't make you a fence sitter. It makes you someone with that greater perspective, which in theory should also provide that person with more information to make suggestions. But anyway, you overreach on the video in the biggest fence sitter fashion. I mean, that's because you're suggesting that there are only two sides, and that there doesn't seem to be much in the way of nuance or kind of detail to the situation and how it's all going on. So fine, you can say that, but unfortunately it isn't accurate. You seem like everything is relative type of guy from this vid. That's not a very noble position to turn your nose up at people from. Okay, well, to one extent or another, everything is relative. But at the same time, in this instance, no, it's not. And that's why I've very specifically pointed out that this meme isn't helpful. This meme is childish and malicious to an extent that if you want to see these people not be these NPCs, if you want to engage in more of a direct solving of the problems that you're perceiving, alienating and agitating these individuals isn't a good thing. And I'd point out again, I don't agree with people on either side of this. When it comes to the individuals who are kind of gathering together and labeling people as Nazis and whatever else, the kind of people throwing out these lines, I mean, fine, I don't agree with them, but then I also don't agree with the people who throw out the equal and opposite lines or the equal and opposite memes across everything, and I go into more detail on that in the video that will come out this coming week. But anyway, but it totally explains why this simple meme flew by you without relativity. I mean, it's the fact that it is relative, the fact that it relates to both people on the left and the right, because they both have levels of collectivist thinking, especially in the United States, where this has become most prominent and prevalent. It's a case of it relates to both, so it didn't fly by me, it stood out to me as hypocritical and punching down, which when you speak of nobility, or not very noble, being ignoble in my position, it's a case of I'm not turning my nose up at people, I'm trying to look them in the eye and tell them that they're not helping. There's a slight difference to those two things. And so when it comes to a noble position, well, a noble position, by a more straightforward definition, so that we know that we're talking about the same thing, is one of integrity and honesty and kind of a level of personal solidarity. Things that if you look at the codes that define this in both the East and the West, I would point out, these are things that have been agreed on by things like the old chivalric code, the Knights Code, or by the Bushido Code, the 8 Virtues, where whilst you had a lot of stuff around fealty to whichever religion, fealty to whichever divinely inspired king or whatever else. A lot of it was around, from the chivalric code, for instance, you would have things like protect the weak and defenseless, refrain from the wanton giving of offense, fight for the welfare of all of that kind of stuff. And then from the Bushido code, again, I think it's one of the core tenets, or two or so of the core tenets, are benevolence, which includes things like sympathy, pity, empathy, affection for others, mercy, and then also politeness and stuff like, I think honor is down there as very much a, if you take offense to something very swiftly. In regards to the response to that video, a lot of people seem to have, you would be ridiculed as short-tempered, and patience was the means by which to move forward. And so rather than ridiculing, rather than attacking these people that you disagree with or that you feel are not living up to an adequate standard, being patient with them, engaging with them, showing sympathy and mercy and reason is more likely to get you somewhere, both in terms of a noble position to take and anything else, which is why I'm sat here going, look, this doesn't work. Could I maybe have as I say at the beginning of the video that's coming out next week, could maybe I have looked at it or put it across in a way that had a better tone? Sure, I'll admit that. My tone was a kind of carryover from some of the other videos that I'd been recording on that day. Fine, I'll put my hands up to that. I'm not perfect. Sometimes there is seepage and drainage between videos in terms of my state, because I'm here doing the same thing throughout a whole day or over a couple of days. And so, sometimes that happens. Fair enough, I'll put my hands up to that. But when it comes to the position that I have taken, I am there trying to reach out to the individuals who are supposedly, in this case, again, they are looking and creating this meme and propagating it, going, this is what is bad about those people, and we will demonstrate it. We will highlight it and throw it out into the world. Great, but you're doing so in a way that's particularly negative, shutting down further conversation. It's not being patient, it's not being reasonable. In which case, me coming to you guys and saying, look, it doesn't work because the way that you are going about it is damaging and it doesn't achieve anything. There is no result here. There is no success or further progress or development here, in which case this is maybe not the best thing to do. That's me trying to sit down and look you in the eye and go, look, here's a bit of a perspective. Here's a bit of a distance. This is my honest viewpoint, my honest discussion point, to try and start a dialogue around what is going on. And so, there you go. But then Toxic Masculinity here goes on to say that I, for one, have not shared or passed a meme on, not once, not really my cup of tea. Fair enough. All power to you. But I do get a great laugh at those using it to troll, because I truly understand how ridiculous these snowflakes have gotten. I mean, yeah, they've gotten ridiculous. They've gotten ridiculous on both sides. This is part of the problem. We've got people on the left who are going, we're victims, we're terrible victims, we're going to whine and complain, and we're going to throw out these continually repeating talking points that we're getting sick of hearing, because they either because they are part of that community, or because there is evidence for it. They are going, yes, we have X, Y, and Z grievances, and we are going to go over them again and again and again. But then you look on the other side, and you have conservatives, and you have traditionalists, and so on and so forth, doing the same thing. Oh, we are victims. Oh, we are oppressed. Oh, we are being sidelined because repeated talking points. And that's just as tiring. And so then, though, if you've got victims on one side and you've got victims on the other side, all the way across, then someone needs to save those victims, right? But if you've got victims all the way across, who's left to save them? Who's left to help? Who's left to bring some reason and some stability back into those people's lives? Because they're not willing to do it for themselves. And when there are people that could stand up and do it, more often than not, personal gain is where things go instead. On either side of things, you can look at Alex Jones, who has had a very loud voice around a whole load of different things, and could do more to stop the us versus them fighting side of things, and yet all he has done is double down and double down and double down on his negative talking points. But then you look at the other side, and you have the same kind of talking heads on the other side as well, with all manner of different weird YouTubers and things. All number of other people. Anita Sarkeesian is always the person that jumps into my mind first and foremost with her rubbish, when she could literally sit down and go, let's actually have some temperance, let's actually have some conversation here. But it never happens because they're just too busy enjoying the fact that they have this following that they can leech from. And so as a result, yeah, these snowflakes, as you put them, have gotten ridiculous, but they have gotten ridiculous on every single extreme of the political compass. And so as a result, who's going to help them become less ridiculous? Because when you throw out negative stimuli, there tend to be two types of people in the world: the people that will run towards it and the people that will run away from it. Most people will try and run away. That's just the way, you know. How are you more likely to survive on instinct, on compulsion? By getting away from danger. Yeah, there aren't that many people out there in the world at large who will see a negative stimulus, like an obvious attack on them, an obvious ridiculing or something like that, and will run towards it. Very, very few. Partly because fight and flight is a thing, but also because when it comes to running towards a negative stimulus that doesn't actually necessarily have something that they can attack, that they can physically manipulate, when it's all social, your serotonin levels kick in, and that's where we have things like confidence, embarrassment, all those kind of emotions building up, you know, and one eroding at the other over time and all that kind of thing. And so as a result, you don't get those people running towards the thing to solve the problem. You get them making jokes to make themselves feel better, to create distance, hence memes like this. You have them yelling and screaming and just repeating their own mantras over and over and over again to hide and to shut down conversation, because it's a way of building another wall between them and the thing that they're afraid of. All of this is built around fear from both sides, and it's kind of sad and to a degree kind of very complimentary of how negative things can become. You know, it's only going to add more steam to the divisions in society that we're seeing across the world at the moment. And so, again, looking back at the more romanticized kind of codes of nobility and chivalry and stuff like that, of conduct, if you like, and you look at it and go, well, things like always speaking the truth are there, but obviously the truth is at least somewhat subjective. You know, having things like, you know, when it says to never refuse a challenge from an equal, fine, from an equal. Refuse a challenge from someone who's below you, though. Don't punch down. And if you're admitting that you're at the same level as one of these other people on the other side of the spectrum that you're having these arguments with, then you're kind of, you know, admitting that they're getting to you as much as you're getting to them. That one, I think it's Sun Tzu that said one of the best ways to cause kind of insult to injury is, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's been a long time since I read The Art of War, but one of the things that was said from my recollection is one of the best ways to deal with an enemy is to ignore them. Yeah, if they are so below your notice, if they have so little power to contend with you because you are so powerful, ignore them. because it might infuriate them, it might cause them to burn themselves out, it might cause them to make mistakes whilst you are calm and collected. In which case, don't start throwing negative stimuli at them in terms of ridicule and name calling and drawing battle lines or any of that shit. Just give yourself that extra little bit of space to go, I don't need to. This is below me. I stick to the sensible things, the reasonable things. Yeah? So your suggestion that you know, that you truly understand how ridiculous these snowflakes have gotten, fair enough. That may very well be your experience of the people that you've interacted with. However, if you've only interacted with one set of people and you're saying that that's then indicative of an entire collective that are aligned to one side, then I'm terribly sorry, but that's a very slim view. I have had, to kind of compare your anecdote here with the anecdotes that I can provide, I have been kind of running into problems in one degree or another with the far left and far right for the longest time, even when I was in work. And yet I have also managed to have, by asking questions, by showing some sympathy and empathy and understanding to the, not necessarily the random talking points that they're bringing up, but the feelings that that person is experiencing. I can sit down and have a decent conversation with those people and often help them learn a better way. Just mocking those people does not let them do that. An example that you will hear in the video that I bring up in the coming week on this, in regards to the responses for some of these other comments as well, is that if these people that are causing the problem on both sides, left and right, these nut jobs that are going and spinning off the same yarns again and again and again and again and again, who are very, very focused on having an enemy, on being a victim, to empower themselves in various ways to try and elicit sympathy and to get a mob, a movement behind them, because they are too frail and too afraid to do things by themselves, to be individual. If that is the case, then those people are screaming and crying and so on like a child that is having a temper tantrum. In which case, though, how do you deal with a child that's having a temper tantrum? If you go and start mocking them, if you go and have a temper tantrum at them for having a temper tantrum, that child is just going to double down on being miserable and a hard time to work with, right? In which case, what do? You ask them what's wrong. You try and elicit some responses so that you can get to the bottom of it. You ignore the emotional aspect if they've actually hurt themselves or if something has actually gone wrong, so that you can find the facts and make them workable. You're not doing that by mocking them. You're doing that by asking questions. You're doing that by being completely straight-faced and being very direct. Yeah, a child has a tantrum because they dropped their lunch on the floor, because something got broken, whatever else. You don't go and have a tantrum. You don't go and take the piss out of that kid for their bad situation. You go over and you stand there and you go, right, well, what happened? And then you listen. And that's one of the things that isn't going on. That's one of the things that this particular meme is preventing in various ways. And especially when it gets to the point of this meme being very malicious in regards to trying to spread false information as well, that's when we get to the point of it being uncalled for and not just punching down, but being a genuine attempt to undermine and subvert and damage other people for no reason. Because this is stuff that you get told as a kid. 2 wrongs don't make a right. And so likening this to a schoolyard kind of situation seems completely legitimate, because apparently people need to learn this all over again, even when they're fully grown adults making content online, having discussions online. You aren't going to get a good result by doing something negative. A negative and negative are just going to make it worse. So if you've got an opponent, someone that is countering kind of the world that you would like to see. Someone who is potentially an obstruction to what you would like to see in the world. Should you copy or mock or otherwise in various other terms be negative towards them as a means of trying to get that positive result? No, because two wrongs don't make a right. Oh, look. There you go. Solve the problem. Let's at least one side be reasonable. And if one side, I mean both sides, are claiming superiority over the other, which is ridiculous, completely ridiculous. But when it comes to it, if you are going to go, those people are like this, then you better make sure that you're not the same. And going, those people aren't like this, when your own side, your own collective, your own group of people are doing the same thing, then, you know, it's whoever is without sin should cast the first stone. But unfortunately, you're all sinners, you know. And I'm not claiming to not be a sinner as well, I would point out, because I would just say that I've got a more nuanced approach personally, because on some things I'll agree on one side, on some things I'll agree on another, and usually never to the extremes that anyone is happy with. You know, the last UK election, a good example of my own personal experience, where I went, everyone else was talking about Tim Farron or Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn or Nigel Farage and all that kind of those kind of things. These random talking points, these people, these personalities. I sat down with the manifestos, went through and went, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a shit idea, that's a shit idea, that's a good idea. And I went down for all of them, every single one of them, every party that I had any option to vote for within my area. And so as a result, I was like, right, well, UKIP had two good policies. I won't be voting for them. Green had X number, Tories had like 10, I think, from what I recall, but then it came down to the Lib Dems having 13 or something, and so, you know, my vote went in that direction on the numbers. And so when I was having conversations both before and afterwards, it was a case of, oh, well, actually, no, these are the things that concern me. These are the things that were relevant to me. These are the things that make sense both for me and the country or the people that I know, or based on these figures from various studies and other bits and pieces. As much as this might not be the most positive thing for whoever else, this is the way that I'm going to vote. In which case, you know, then I either wasn't liberal enough for certain friends, I wasn't conservative enough for other friends, for certain people who were voting very conservatively. Even though I had admitted that there were a collection of good policies in, say, the Conservative or the UKIP manifestos, it wasn't enough, you know. And so this is part of the problem. There's no room anymore on either side of politics, on any of the four main areas of politics, for a nuanced and intelligent way of approaching these discussions, because you try and do it on the left and you get called a racist or a bigot or whatever else. You do it on the right and you have people yelling freedom of speech to freedom of consequence, or you have people who are shaming you for being too liberal just because there's a reason that for instance on healthcare you've got so many people complaining against it in various ways, when most of the Western world, most of the world at the moment that actually has decent economies and things like that, have kind of single payer healthcare systems and stuff like that. And so, you know, you get this on every single side. If you're a progressive, then you want to move forward, you want to kind of continue to do really well and jump into the future. But, you know, there are a lot of issues with doing that because the future is so unknown and so unstable, so trying to get all of that stuff done without framework is a pain in the arse. But then if you state that, then you're not committed enough as a moderate individual, someone that's deliberate in sitting in the middle to get all of these good ideas to make them actionable. If you go the other way, though, and you've got a lot of traditionalist people who are going, right, well, we want to return to these systems because those were the good old days, or we want to honor these older traditions, these older things, and it's like, yeah, but those are traditions, those are viewpoints, those are methods. The number of people I've had conversations with around things like trickle-down economics, which doesn't work, because when it comes to trickle-down economics, the idea is that it's like a pyramid of wine glasses, right? Or a tower of wine glasses, but it doesn't work that way, because in terms of money, the people at the top, they've got this wine glass that has an infinite volume, and so as a result there is never any trickling down, because the amount of wine slash fluid slash money never reaches the brim, and so it doesn't work. And yet the number of people that I have conversations with about that on a fairly surprisingly regular basis, I would say, it kind of rolls into, yeah, but that's some very conservative thinking. That's some stuff that's been talked about for a long time, been debunked, been disproven, but it's still a talking point that keeps coming up, And so then you go, well, how about these economic models that have been more demonstrably successful? Oh, they're different. Oh, they're too strange. Oh, they're scary. Right, okay, so regardless of whether the idea is good or not, it doesn't really matter. There's a reason why, for instance, Theresa May at the recent Conservative Party conference, for her speech, comes waddling out to music, dancing and stuff like that, and is making jokes and stuff like that, because it's like, right, if you can turn her into a dancing monkey that spins jokes, guess what? People are going to go away with a more positive impression of her. That positive impression is going to feed over, and so you've got that rolling thing. It's sales. You go into anywhere that's going to sell you anything. They aren't selling you the product, they're selling you the salesman. If you buy the salesman, the product's an extra. That's almost universal in regards to selling stuff. And that's what we keep seeing. Oh, I like this person, they're talking about this on this side, and so as a result, I'm going to parrot them, I'm going to mimic them, I'm going to assume that their knowledge is as worthwhile as my own, I'm going to conflate the two, I'm going to roll it all together, and I'm going to spit out these talking points. Yeah, okay, that's why we see this on both the left and the right, and it's a mess. If you're looking, though, the libertarian versus authoritarian axis on the whole compass, then you've got the same issues, because you've got the very libertarian people who are going, we want no involvement from the government, we want basically an anarchist almost kind of state where everyone is just able to be themselves and do their own thing and not have anyone interfere with them ever. And then on the authoritarian side of things, you've got a lot of what we're actually seeing at the moment, which again is kind of scary, with additional police states, concern around surveillance, where they want to, where the powers that be want to up surveillance in various ways, even against completely innocent people that have no reason to be surveilled. And we see these things again and again, where, yeah, you've got some good policies, but trying to discuss those policies to get to the right places is difficult. Well, I'm not someone that sits down and will happily just absorb the whole, whatever, 56, 76, whatever number it was, genders that gets spewed out there as this kind of weird shotgun blast of stuff that makes no sense. But at the same time, if someone wants to sit down and have a more in-depth discussion on the requirements and the needs of trans people, the safeguards for people seeking to transition or seeking to alter their gender, where, again, from other videos I've done, the distinction between gender and sex are surprisingly simple, but no one's really willing to listen to those anymore. Where you've got one that's biological, one that's experiential, but as a result they are intrinsically linked and can be derived from, one is derived from the other. and yet no one's willing to listen to that. They're ephemeral social constructs, which again doesn't make any sense. But I'm willing to sit down and have the discussion around the processes that these people are put through in a legal standpoint. I'm willing to sit down and discuss why it's worthwhile in kind of engaging with those additional, very, very small demographics that have a very high focus on this, so that we can broaden the perspective that, say, law has, or that other various systems have. And so as a result, we need to encourage that kind of discussion rather than shutting it all down. And so as a result, yeah, I'm used to the oh, you're a fence sitter and stuff like that, but it's or at least the kind of suggestion that that moderates are too moderate. But at the same time, the position taken, as I've discussed in other videos in the past, is if the compass is actually a mountain, which again, kind of fitting for Man on the Silver Mountain on the channel here, but if you've got this where you've got the center point being the highest peak, and then the rest of the area being the land surrounding it, the best view, the best place to see what's going on, how it's working, what's not, all of that kind of stuff is at the top. It's at that peak, it's at that summit. And so as a result of being at that summit, you get that view of everything. You get to be honest with everyone. You get to have that extra information that other people might not have seen, because they are either very happy sat on their one side of the mountain, or because they are so focused on only looking at people on another very specific side. At the moment in the States, for instance, where you've got the Democrats versus the Republicans, you've got the Democrats being highly, with the possible exception of a handful, the vast majority of the Democratic Party up until very recently have been very kind of authoritarian Democrats. So they might have pushed more left-leaning agendas, but their left-leaning agendas are still fairly centrist, which isn't really that kind of excessive. And it's only more recently that they have been able to start pushing things further left. But at the same time, that's not a good thing, because they are edging towards a very steep drop-off. But then on the other side, you've got a very authoritarian Republican Party as well. And so as a result, you've got these two authoritarian groups that are politically opposed, but methodologically similar. And as a result, you're missing out a good half of the political landscape, and it's not being represented, it's not being worked on, and things are being missed, and that's unfortunate. It's a bit of a pain in the arse, and especially when you've got someone like me who, again, sat outside of that country, sat outside of that discussion, being able to look in, gather information, evidence, and other bits and pieces from all over the place, as well as just people are what I do for a living. I engage with people to help them improve their situations, and one of the biggest things that has to be done in regards to that is raising awareness, building up that understanding of yourself, of your situation, everything in and around that. All needs to be worked on, all needs to be broken down. And a big part of that is building rapport, building communications with people. And nothing ever gets done if you don't do those things. That's one of the biggest problems with very hyper-individualistic societies. They have real trouble getting that communication running and working with each other because they are too individualistic. Look at, for instance, take a look at government at the moment, where government is very collectivist because you've got your battle lines drawn. But then you look, for instance, at, say, a corporate environment. Internal corporate environments are very much built around the individualistic, the ruthless, the selfish, and it's built on exploitation to a greater or lesser extent. And so as a result, those places are just as negative. We see people who are going to war with each other over things like politics because their tribe is being attacked by another tribe, or you go and look at the corporate environment where everyone's out for themselves, everyone's out for their next promotion, everyone's willing to stab each other in the back, and rather unsurprisingly, you get people who are stressed, you get very high staff turnover, you've got people whose lives are miserable, and it all kind of boils down to, yeah, none of these extremes work. We need to take the good ideas, we need to focus on what is functional, what gets us the result we want, take the things that work from, doesn't matter where they come from, if they work from the left, the right, from the authoritarian or from the libertarian, there needs to be some kind of set of balances in there. And so if we can get the good things to balance out so that we can ignore the negatives, you know, we've just got all these good ideas that as we make as compatible as we can and we make it work. It's never going to be perfect, it's never going to be this grand utopia, because you're never going to have people agreeing on absolutely everything. That's just unrealistic. But when it comes to everything else, when you suggested that I'm a everything's relative kind of person, yeah, everything is relative. If you've got this balance across these two different axes to work with, then you need to find that balance to make things functional and make things stable. You know, you're not going to have a stable environment if it's very heavily weighted in one direction. You need to have that balance there to make sure that you've got a decent kind of place to build. You know, I've talked about building towers on sand and things like that before as a metaphor or analogy for kind of building parts of yourself, improving your confidence and whatever else. Finding that good bedrock to start improving yourself on, and that kind of thing. And it's a case of going, right, well, we need to do that across the board for everything. But if you don't have that solid foundation that's got that good kind of flat layer to it that you can use, you're going to end up with, for instance, a house with subsidence. Yeah, it's not going to be a comfortable environment for very long. It will crumble, it will collapse. The things that last the longest are the ones that are built on a good solid ground with a flat foundation that is very well reinforced. Neither of the perspectives that that meme interacts with, be it the people who it is targeted and targeted towards in regards to the audience that will appreciate it, or the people who are being ridiculed by it, doesn't help anyone, because it shuts down discussion, causes instability, and causes a negative environment, so that the conversations that would solve all the problems, as difficult as they would probably be, can't be had. Or at least no one's willing to have them on any major scale, because you've got these large collectives on both sides doing silly shit like this. So feel free to call me what you want. That so far, though, is probably one of my favourite more negative comments that I've received on the channel. And it's interesting to be called something that's completely counter to everything that I've been called my entire life. So, you know, there you go, new experience for me, I guess. But either way, guys, I think what I'm going to do is start to just call it here. We've only got a few minutes left, all told. And so just before I go, again, this week we've got follow-ups to the female Viagra video, as well as me addressing more of the comments from the NPC meme video, where I go into a few more specifics, and a fair amount of that will probably be some degree of repetition from what I've been talking about here, but in more broad terms, because I'm addressing the other comments. If you've got any other comments for those people that might still not have seen that video, feel free to put them there. I will see them, I will read through them, I will review them, but I've got to move on with other stuff that I'm doing, so I probably won't be replying to them or moving or kind of going back to them. But then otherwise we've got some other more interesting videos going back towards some of the stuff that we've been talking about over the last month or so in regards to relationships and other bits and pieces. So if you're maybe kind of going, oh well, all those videos that we were having a lot of have kind of stopped for the moment, where have they gone? They're going to have another couple of those coming next week, but there were just a few things this week that I kind of wanted to jump in on, but which also, you know, I had another couple of videos that were planned that I didn't get to record, which are now some of the ones that are coming out next week. And so it was just a bit of a kind of follow on from the week before that was very busy, because I do most of my recording, apart from these live streams, I do pretty much all of my recording the week before. And so if I had a lot going on with those opportunities that I've referred to and some of the other bits and pieces that are going on with me, I didn't have the time to sit down and record 2 weeks ago, which means, or last week, and so this week that's just gone, didn't have a couple of videos, unfortunately, just due to time and a couple of other technical issues, because at one point we had a fairly significant power outage the other day, which kind of slowed me down. So there's that, but otherwise, guys, I think I'm going to leave it here. So again, I'm sorry if this is a little bit choppy in places, because it's I don't know what was going on earlier when it was just loading every few sentences. My OBS still says that I've not dropped any frames and that everything else is running fine, so hopefully the video on demand, the archive version, will still have everything that I've said. Oh, excuse me. But otherwise, guys, if it doesn't actually, drop me a comment to let me know that it doesn't. I'll probably watch the archive later as well, just to see what happened. But if you guys are spotting stuff as well, drop me a comment and I'll try and see what I'm seeing in and around that as well. But again, it seems, especially from some of the other larger YouTubers that have been talking about the issues with YouTube lately, it doesn't seem to be just me, but of course I'm very much at the kind of bottom of the pile, so it's not a big surprise to me that it would impact me in various ways, like some of the ways that it's breaking over the last week. But again, this is where, to me and to my mind, one of the things that sits in my head is they've got these bugs that are coming out, they've got these problems that are being caused because of Markiplier suggested that it was probably Google Plus and the removal of Google Plus, or the preparations for shutting it down, and that could very well be the case. But again, on top of that, I would imagine that there are other things it could be. And one of the things that stands out in my mind is that they are obviously looking to do some kind of major overhaul towards the end of this year and the beginning of 2019, considering that they are overhauling the back of house for the Creators Studio stuff that they're unleashing. And so I would imagine that that's a problem as well. So, we'll have to see if this all pans out and what they're going to do. But as has been said by a good number of people, both big and small, on the platform, it's kind of a YouTube is saying that they want to support people, that they want to help us grow, want to help us develop and all that kind of stuff, but they're not really showing us that they are, because there's no communication. They're not listening to the things that we actually want, and they're going about it in a really daft way. So and especially when they deprived an awful lot of people of things like monetization and stuff as well. It's a mess, and they seem to be, again, hypocrisy, silly bollocks. So hey, but either way, guys, I hope this has been interesting, and I just wanted to respond to that, considering it was a comment that came through after I'd done the video on comments and things from that other video, the follow-up. And it had some interesting points and stuff, but it was just really interesting to see that kind of opinion on me, if you like. And so I wanted to both share it and kind of break it down a little bit, just because it was interesting to have that kind of response. But also to all those people that maybe just came, watched the video, didn't like it, didn't necessarily comment, but left a dislike, or left a comment that was maybe meant to be more insulting or more taking the piss. I mean, what it comes down to is the more engagement you give me, the more I benefit. So the dislikes, likes, comments, they don't really make any significant difference, other than just it counts towards an engagement metric. from what I understand and from some of the bits and pieces that I've done. So in which case, you know, thanks for those dislikes, thanks for all of the engagement around that video, it meant a lot. And again, also thanks to all those people who took the time to watch the female Viagra video, because if anything, I think that was probably the most important video that I have done in the last couple of weeks, if not the last month or two at least, because the misconceptions around those kind of things are pretty huge. And especially considering I come from a family of nurses, and I did all sciences and things through college and bits and pieces as well. Like, I'm sat here looking at it going, this makes no fucking sense, but people are listening to it. People are seeing this bad example and following through on it. And that's worrying, especially considering, again, it's pills being ground up and put into someone else's drinks. You know, haven't we got to the point already where we can just admit that that's not a good thing unless it's something you're told to do by a doctor, you know? But hey, maybe I'm wrong, and the putting the information out there again was just more useful. But either way, thanks again to all those people who watched that video as well, and otherwise thank you to the people who are still in the I almost said lobby there, but thanks to all the people that have watched the live stream. I hope it's been informative and that you've been enjoying it. Again, only a couple of you, but it's nice to see that there are a couple more people turning up every now and again, even if it seems to be that you just want to hear me speak, and that you don't have, you know, one of the first guys that turned up to the live stream said they didn't have any questions, but I was doing a great job and he liked it, so thank you very much to him. Unfortunately, I can't remember your name off the top of my head. But again, if that's what people are finding nice about turning up to the stream, by all means, I have more than enough to talk about, and most of my days involve asking questions and listening. So it's I've got things to say. But either way, guys, thank you very much for watching, and yeah, as said, there's a video coming out at 5, Conan Exiles video, and then other than that, I'll be back on Monday with some other stuff, and also we've got I would love to do more for Halloween, because I love Halloween. It's possibly the only celebration during the year that I care about, or that is interesting to me in some way. But whilst I don't have a lot to do for Halloween on the channel and stuff, I do have a couple of things that I want to do. So either way, tune in for those as well, and thank you very much, and I will see you next week. Take care. Have a great weekend.